Here are 5 common myths about refusing a breath test. Number 1, that refusing a breath test means you get to go free. A lot of people get deceived by American media and different lawyers on the internet who are not from Canada who advise not to take a breath test. And in some US states, that's probably good advice, but it's terrible advice in Canada. So you don't have the right to refuse to take a breath test in Canada. The second myth that is common about breath testing is that it's not sanitary. A lot of people are afraid because they see a device put into their face. They don't know if anybody else has blown on it before. They don't know who's touched it. When the officers set up the device, they actually unwrap the mouthpiece from individually sealed plastic, and they're trained to hold the plastic as they insert the mouthpiece into the device and then remove the plastic. So their hand never makes contact with anything that your face or your mouth is going to make contact with. So it is as sanitary as it can be. Number 3, you can request an alternative to a breath test. This, again, is a significant myth that I encounter. People think, well, I don't want to take a breath test, and so I'm going to ask to provide a blood test instead because I think a blood sample is more reliable. Or I'm going to ask to do physical sobriety tests instead to demonstrate that I'm sober. You don't get the choice. Once the officer demands that you provide the breath sample, you're legally obligated to provide it, provided the demand is lawful. But it's not for you to assess the lawfulness of the demand in the moment. So you can't choose an alternative to the breath test. Number 4 myth that I hear about breath testing is people saying that breath tests aren't reliable. And that's not inherently true. While there are issues with some of the science that has been used to establish breath testing, the majority of the population does indeed fall within the partition ratio. Essentially, 2,100 parts of your air, your breath, is equivalent to 1 part of your blood, and so you can get an equivalency that way. There are people who are outliers, and there are more outliers than the original science thought, but just because there are those outliers, and just because the breath test is applying a specific partition ratio doesn't mean that it's inherently unreliable. The devices are also required to be regularly checked for calibration and recalibrated and have annual servicing. Where we get into reliability problems with breathalyzer tests is really more related to things that can impact the breath test externally, like burping, belching, vomiting, regurgitation, objects in your mouth, recent consumption of alcohol or products containing alcohol, mouthwash, chewing gum, that type of thing. So it's not the test itself that is the problem, but the conditions in which the test is taken. And the 5th big myth that I hear about breath testing most commonly in my practice is that the breath test result can be used as evidence against you. A roadside breath test in a criminal investigation is only admissible for the purposes of giving the police the grounds to arrest you and then take later samples at the police station into a bigger type of breathalyzer. The roadside breathalyzer test is not able to be used to prove an offense. There are some exceptions to this, including that the breath test results can be used to support provincial administrative license suspensions, like immediate roadside prohibition in British Columbia, the immediate roadside suspension in Alberta, 24-hour prohibitions, 12-hour prohibitions, those type of short alcohol-related prohibitions. But those are not considered to be offenses. And so the breath test is just part of the evidence that the administrative decision maker considers rather than evidence used to establish a person's guilt. And I argued a case in the Court of Appeal late last year where the Court of Appeal ruled effectively that the breath test isn't presumptively proof that a person is over 80 and that a person can make arguments to establish that their blood alcohol concentration didn't exceed the legal limit, notwithstanding the result of the test. So those are the 5 most common myths I hear about refusing a breath test.